this country and this world is passing through. And yesterday we did celebrate the Dhammachakra Anupravartan or Dhammachakra Pravartan Day, the Dhamma Revolution Day, where we have a wonderful response across the world. And Nagarjuna Training Institute has continued since many years, past 2 decades, continued the tradition of celebrating the public function followed by the seminar. I'm very happy to inform you, friends, that the very important eminent figures in the Ambedkarite Buddhist world, Ambedkarite world and Buddhist world, we awarded them and we honored them, appreciated their great work. Late Professor Ghaylamvet, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, one of the sort of world acclaimed legendary scholar and a monk in Buddhist world, Kim Behen and respected Yalhar Baliji for their work with the Dr. Ambedkar Prabuddha Bharat Award 2021. And I announced about this and I shared about this seminar with a lot of my friends, and they were extremely happy to have organized such a relevant topic in the world and the crisis we are passing through. I won't take much time besides formally inviting, welcoming all of you, as we know that Dr. Ambedkar says that the function of religion is to reconstruct the world and to make it happy and not to explain its origin or the end. So Dr. Ambedkar probably is only the person in the modern time who saw the very strong seeds to erect the culture, nations, societies, an individual, and also a project of liberation in the teachings of the Buddha. World have celebrated the Buddha, but probably world could not yet realize the fullest dynamics of liberation in whatever circumstances and situation we live in, whatever caste, culture, nation, poverties and richness we live in, at the fullest. The way Dr. Ambedkar pedagogically, methodologically, politically, socially, culturally try to envision the world and a rather better world. And he recognizes the function of religion, and he recognizes the value of the religion for the society, but he has very strong parameters for the religion, how it must be in competent or in complementary with the sciences and with accordance with the religion, and it must not promote or sanctify the poverty and slavery, rather it promote the liberty, equality and fraternity. So that's the dream of reconstructing the world Dr. Ambedkar has envisioned, not just for India, but for every citizen in this country and probably the world citizens. And being a follower of Dr. Ambedkar and the Buddha, I think we are the first constituency to explore this thinking and educate the society, may they be academic or non-academic, activists or practitioners. This is a high time, I think, that the first-handed constituency of Dr. Ambedkar must take a lead without quarrels and divides. So in this space where academician, students, various faculties across the country, and also some of the monks from Burma, I can see in the gathering, have joined. So I welcome all of you, dear friends, to get more into this discussion today to enlighten from the eminent speakers and the very dignified chairs in today's seminar. So briefly, this seminar would be divided into two sessions. First session would be understanding the crisis. What are the problems? What are the crises we are passing through? And we have dignified speakers, which respected chair will introduce them. And in second session from 2:15 p.m. afternoon onwards, respected Professor Thorat sir would chair that session, and he will introduce his speakers and would chair this session. So I very wholeheartedly welcome dear friends in this such a noble cause and wonderful seminar. I hope this day delivers us some insights and also action to act to make this world better, not just in theory or in forms, but in facts. So I now hand it over behalf of Nagarjuna Training Institute as a director to the chair of this morning session, Dhamachari Lokamitra ji, to lead the first session. Thank you very much, and hand it over to Dhamachari Lokamitra ji.
So thank you very much, Maytrivir. Namo Buddhaya and Jai Bhim to all. I can only endorse what Maytrivir has said by way of introduction, that there could be no more important topic at present, and Dr. Ambedkar is the guide, the exemplary guide we have before us. The world has changed socially, politically, economically more drastically than ever since the Second World War, and that's a very big statement. I don't think anyone really understands the ways it's changed, it's changing, and the long-term impact. Everyone is sort of, people have ideas, people have theories, but my impression is that most people are sort of still struggling. So it's in this situation, I think we have to turn, as Maytrivir said, to Dr. Ambedkar's principles of reconstructing the society and the world. But before we do that, we need to try and understand the present crisis, what the pandemic has brought to light and what it has engendered. And as I said, although we won't fully understand until we look back in retrospect, we can identify some factors and tendencies now. It's absolutely clear that social, economic, and legal inequalities have been exposed as never before, and in many cases exacerbated, made much worse. Just one seemingly innocuous example, the world is moving so much faster towards digitalization. So much education is now taking place online. Children in slums, they don't have a chance. Children in the villages, they don't have a chance. So in the new digitalized world, and there's no turning back from that, the marginalized are most likely to fall back even more than they are now. Economics, there are differences as to how many people have actually lost work since the beginning of the pandemic, but some people are saying over 250 million people more have moved into poverty or below the poverty line as a result of the pandemic. It could be more. And of course, we know the bulk of them will be from the marginalized and discriminated communities. And then, it's clear for all to see that there's a movement away from democracy in the world towards authoritarianism. It was there before COVID, but it's made greater bounds, greater strides since the pandemic. And Dr. Ambedkar is emerging as the most respected champion of both equality and democracy. We know that in India, But actually, it's only recently in India that he's being appreciated widely. I remember when I came to live in India 43, 44 years ago, he did not have that widespread respect by any means at all. And those of you who are my age or approaching my age will know that. And I found so many people who would speak disparagingly about him outside his own community and others. Now that's changed so much. He's highly respected by so many people throughout, well, all communities in India. And he's beginning to be respected outside India. And that also has moved enormously over the last 20, 30 years. So we have an opportunity now to explore his principles and apply them to this drastically changed India and the world. But first, as 𝗏𝒍𝒏𝒂𝒍 says, we have to try and understand what is happening, understand the crisis. And that's what we're going to look at in this morning's session. And to enable us to do that, we have four very, very distinguished speakers. And they're all in their own way activists. They're all making a special contribution to what we call Dr. Ambedkar's Dhamma Revolution that he initiated 65 years ago. So in other words, they are all in their own way contributing to reconstructing the world. You'll have to forgive me for not saying much about them. I could speak a lot about them. I'm just going to introduce them very, very briefly before each one speaks. Afterwards, if there's time, we can have a few questions, but I'm not promising that because I don't know how long it will go on. We've asked speakers to speak for 15 minutes. We'll extend it to 20 minutes. I will ring a bell after 15 minutes and a final bell after 20 minutes. So I hope that's clear to everyone. Personally, I'm looking forward very much to this whole day. So we're going to start with Professor Alone, who I know a little bit and respect his work. He's professor in the School of Arts and Aesthetics in JNU, New Delhi, and he has a distinguished academic career lecturing in different parts of the world. He has, which I find most interesting, a very strong connection with China and is doing what he can to promote Dr. Ambedkar's teachings and approach to Buddhism there. He's served on various government committees and he's especially interested in Buddhist art, history and modern Buddhist art in India. So I welcome Professor Alone to share his thinking with us on today's topic.
Thank you, Lokamitra ji. Thank you very much. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya. Warm greetings on the occasion of Dhamma Diksha Din. I come from Chandrapur, so our Dhamma Diksha Din is 16th October. So I wish you all a very happy Dhamma Diksha Day from the people of Chandrapur. At the outset, I must thank Nagaloka, Lokamitra and his team for making this program and inviting me. But at the same time, I would also specifically mention that the ways in which Nagaloka as an institution has developed and working in the society, training people, making education accessible, and also the work which Nagaloka has conducted during pandemic. I congratulate all that work, and it indeed gives a very positive message to the society that the Buddhist community in India are really compassionate one. They are the one who follow compassion in the later end spirit. I also congratulate the institution for conducting a lot of those activities and also the training programs for the youngsters. It is very important to have training programs for the youngsters and really make them aware of the of the problems of the society, and in general, and also specific to the Buddhism, and also the ways in which Baba Sahib interpreted Buddhism. So I just wish to outline certain problematics even in the post-pandemic world. There is a crisis as far as, first I would like to touch upon the academic part of the issue. We have a lot of people in the academic world. They are getting represented, but they are represented only in terms of physical representation. I really doubt, how much that intellectual representation is there, and that intellectual representation can only be judged by the quality of the work and not by the quantity of the work. The ways in which certain kind of a work which is getting promoted is not really going to help us in many ways to understand the intricacies of the problems, because you may have a figurative representation of the problem in terms of certain figures and facts and all those things, but that does not mean that it is going to create any enabling process. So that enabling process is a very important aspect and a very integrated and embedded aspect when it comes to the writings from the Buddhist perspective, Buddhist philosophy, and also the rationale in our world of interpretations. And that is precisely the reason, when I always say that there has to have some rationality, and the philosophers have always argued that rationality is always relative, and I always maintain that yes, rationality is always relative, but its relativeness depends on its objective. If the objective of the rationality is that of warding off the ignorances, then it becomes a righteous rationality, it becomes a samyak rationality. And if it does not, if its objective is to maintain the ignorances, then it becomes a protected ignorance. It becomes an intentional act. It becomes a samyak rationality. So these are the amount of protected ignorances society has created, and the ways in which the academic world is also nurturing and maintaining it is just bizarre. It needs to be interrogated. When I say, there is a fantastic, I can draw a good example. When Buddha Ghosha went to Sri Lanka, and Sri Lankan monks really wanted to test his knowledge, so they asked him one line, the Pali verse, Anto jata bhi jata jata jatita pajata gottam pruchhami ko 𝗍𝒏𝒂𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒍 jata. And in order to, and Buddha, of course, Buddha gave that answer when he was asked this question at Nalanda, when he was in Nalanda Vihar, and one Brahmin comes and asks him this particular question, and Buddha answers that question. Now, in order to explain that particular answer, he wrote a text called Visuddhimagga. Now, you have to understand the power of interpretations and the ways in which the texts are created, and even when it comes to the philosophical persuasions, how the theory of Pratyuta Samutpad has become a very potent and the most important theoretical paradigm to reconstruct the world and also make interpretative world completely different away from speculative metaphysics. The ways in which people have developed the urge for theorization, and also the whole aspect of reductive urge. That reductive urge thrives on derivation and does not create anything new or any key as such. The ways in which Baba Sahib has created certain paradigms, certain critical frameworks, certain nomenclatures, and also certain conceptual terms through his writings is phenomenal. Are we really taking that Ambedkar discourse forward? Often there is this tendency among others to call anything related with Dr. Ambedkar, anything related with Buddhism as Dalit discourse. I have a strong objection to it, a very strong objection to it. What do you mean by that? Can any discourse as by Dr. Ambedkar or Buddhist discourse can be categorized as Dalit discourse? What is important for us to understand and for them to understand is whether it follows the logic of Pratyuta Samutpad or not. And it is this particular logic that becomes very important in order to present a critique of the self and also critique of the non-self, and also to understand the self as well as non-self, and also to understand the theoretical paradigm which is being constructed through the philosophical frameworks of postmodernism. It is, you have to question that. What is important for us is that do we address these concerns in our academic practices, and do we really create that kind of a knowledge, that kind of a text? Because this, as I said, enabling process is very important and very fundamental. There is no point in eulogizing Gandhi. There is no point in eulogizing people who are anti-Pratyuta Samutpad. In the public sphere in India, those who have bad-mouthed about communities, those who have been Vedantics all in their life, those who have not created structures of equality, they are being imposed and re-inscribed all the time. And one of the finest example I give you, the people who were against Hindu Code Bill, they are the one who are eulogized in the post-Hindu Code Bill, and more specifically post-1956. They are the one who are eulogized, and the streets, the square, the railway stations and everything are being named, and the statues are being created in their honor. So this anti-women attitude, this anti-women attitude is being nurtured by the respective political parties, not only this dispensation, but also the earlier dispensations. And just imagine a person who talks about all nonsensical things about the Shudra community. His name is given to the railway station in Mumbai. So the public memory is constantly being bombarded by this, by doing these kind of activities, and which are completely adhere to the Vedantic logic. So therefore, one has to really question this attitude. You have to really dismantle these presuppositions. And we also need to see that when you are categorized into, or you are typified under certain categories, you have to also categorize them like their discourse, unless until you say that it is a caste Hindu discourse. Gandhi discourse is caste Hindu discourse. The political discourses in India is all caste Hindu discourse. Unless until you do not touch upon these particular critical parameters, there will be constant ghettoization to what you are doing or what the Ambedkarites are doing. I also distinguish between the Ambedkarite and Ambedkarian. The Ambedkarian critical framework is more encompassing. The Ambedkarites are the ones who are following it, who are practicing. But at the same time, you need to have the institutional morality. It is because of not having institutional morality, we constantly face problems in our institution buildings and the running of the institution. Everybody wants to have a space. Everybody wants to have a leader. Everybody wants to become a leader. Now, people in certain aspect emulate some people and completely bypass the hard work which needed to be done in order to understand the others. There is so much of work about discrimination, but there is hardly any work on the other Shudra communities, and also the psychotic perversions that are being practiced, which are anti-Buddhist and anti-national in India and anti-constitutional in India. So these psychotic perversions needs to be addressed, and it can only be addressed through the conceptual formulation of 𝒂𝒏𝒂𝒍. And also I often use my own conceptual formulation of protected ignorance. The presuppositions are embedded in nature. Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist logic, Bhagwan Gautam Buddha was the first person who rejected this idea of presupposition. Today, the concept of presupposition is completely discarded by the postmodern philosopher. But even the postmodernist philosophers, they fall back on Kant. I don't understand why. And why one should get so much amused, so much abused, and so much ghettoized by Kant. The modern world needs to come out of this Kantian idea of sublime and also the Kantian idea of self-autonomous. The self-autonomy which the Buddha has provided through his discourses and through his conduct is phenomenal, unparalleled in the world. But then you again fall back on Kant, and the political scientists in India would not like to see the politics in terms of Ambedkar and anti-Ambedkar. The political scientists, the sociologists in India would not like to see Ambedkar as a guiding force. I don't see people using this critical framework of principles and rules in the analysis of the society, be it any society. I even find it so difficult to make people understand. We talk about the Buddhist institution. We often talk about establishing the Buddhist university and all those things. Where are the people to teach? After 1956, we hardly produce any scholar who can really stand in the world and say, yes, I am there and I am willing to have a debate. I don't see people. When people talk about Gramsci, I absolutely have no problems with the Gramsci. But the followers of Gramsci in India have abused Gramsci like anything. Gramsci has been critical of Gandhi, but the followers of Gramsci, they went on elogizing Gandhi in India. The contemporary India needs a different paradigm of analysis. The contemporary India needs a very critical parameters that needs to be evolved through the theory of 𝒂𝒏𝒂𝒍, and not by simply Deleuzian or the Lacanian or the Foucauldian terms. The anarchy which gets analyzed by Michel Foucault is fantastic, no doubt about that. But the youngsters get completely get carried away by that kind of an anarchy, and they wish to live in the anarchic world. That is nonsense. Baba Sahib was completely against anarchy. He went on giving solutions to the anarchies that have been practicing in India. We have created number of bhashanbaz in the society. It is not that bad. There are number of good things we have created. We don't want that ritualistic kind of a Buddhism to be followed by the people. While I was in China, one youngster, I asked him, do you believe in equality? He said, yes. I said, do you believe in fraternity? He said, yes. I said, do you believe in liberty? He said, yes. I said, do you believe in the soul? He said, no. I said, do you believe in the rebirth of soul? He said, no. I said, do you believe in the rebirth? He said, no. Then I asked him, I said, do you believe in fraternity, in Maitri, compassion? He said, yes. I said, you are Buddhist. And he said, no, I don't go to the Buddha temple. I said, when did Buddha say you should chant Buddham Saranam Gacchami? That's a question. Because any rational mind will look for the ethical, moral, and the scientificity of the life. And that is precisely the reason why Baba Sahib said, if modern man needs a religion, then which religion he should choose? There is no point in eulogizing past all the time. One should learn from the past. And one should see What are going to be the solutions in the present context? What are going to be the problems in the present context? And how you can arrive at solutions. So it is all about warding off the sorrows in the life. The sorrows are plenty. And that does not mean that sitting in the meditation posture and do meditation, you will resolve the problems or the problems which are being faced by the society. There is so much. Say, for example, the Ambedkarite society in Maharashtra has the only society in India that has created a fantastic paradigm of intellectual entertainment. And that is how we have number of Bhashanbaz in India, in Maharashtra. So every village, everywhere you have fantastic Bhashanbaz. I mean, they are invited, and it's an intellectual entertainment. That's a different kind of a cultural things which has been created. It is the only society in India that has made this kind of a practice. One cannot see it. We have to see it from the popular perception. You have to see it from the popular mode of thinking as to how certain ideas are getting disseminated. People are not much interested in the figural terms. People are more interested in the conceptual terms. People are more interested in order to understand how you can interpret Dr. Ambedkar, how you can interpret Buddhism, and how you can understand Buddhism. While there is, with the coming of the digital technology, there is a mushrooming of the WhatsApp scholars on WhatsApp groups, and everybody fights as if they are the great thinkers, as if they are the one who are the only one who can direct to the society. There are these misnomers that have been created, and that misnomer has come precisely because there is a lack of institutional ethicality and morality, and also there is a lack of intellectual honesty. The ways in which mushrooming of the Pali institutions have emerged in Maharashtra, and a very good interest has been created in the study of Pali, but in the process, they are reducing to the Shabda Pramanya logic, which Baba Saheb was completely against. And even if you see the discourses in the Digha Nikaya, even Buddha completely bypasses those things. There is a complete bypass. And he says, you should not believe anything if it is not in tune with my basic principles, my basic theoretical principles. That's how he says in the Digha Nikaya. But irrespective of that, instead of becoming critical, you become ghettoized. And to an extent, somebody said that Buddha in his Dhamma creating fundamentalism. I don't understand what kind of a fundamentalism it is creating. If people are defending Buddha in his Dhamma, they are defending on certain principles. They are defending on certain logic. There has been a criticism on Buddha and his Dhamma. The first person who defended that book was Dr. Ananda Kausalya. There has been a new thinking. Baba Saheb used Chinese Buddha Charita and not the Sri Lankan version of the Buddha Charita to construct to write the Buddha and his Dhamma. He need to explore the multiple sources. He did not say that fine, I will not choose some Brahmin or anything. That is all nonsense. Asang was a great philosopher, and while explaining Shunyata, Baba Saheb quotes Asang. We have not been really able to understand what the contribution of Asang, what is the contribution of Vasubandhu, what is the contribution of Dignath, what is the contribution of Dharmakir.
Professor, if you could conclude now, I'd appreciate.
Thank you. So why there cannot be this criticality? And we also need to study the Sanskrit Buddhism. Very important to understand the languages. I'm not a person from language. I come from a different discipline. But when it comes to application of these things, there are a number of people who are good in narrating history. But we need to contemporize those terms, whether it is terms like Prayojana Sambandha, whether it is term like Shabdamay, Arthamay, Prayojiniya Artha, or Hetu Sambandha, or Swarthanuman, or Hetu Bin. These are the kind of the critical terms that have emerged out of the Buddhist philosophy, and you need to really contemporize them. And if you don't contemporize them, then I don't think we will really survive in this world of knowledge production process. And the last, I would like to also submit that the society is spending so much of money in the competitive examinations. We are spending so much of money, but we also need to see people who are not into that mold. And moreover, how many government positions are there and how much investment we are making for that. You need to calculate that and rethink and see the alternative modes of employment, and also creating certain opportunities and make our people self-independent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Professor Aloni, for a very lively presentation. I'm not going to attempt to sum up what you've said. I think that would be a disservice to you. But I found it very interesting. In a sense, you are saying that before we can examine the problem and work with the problems, we have to look at ourselves, our own attitudes, especially the intellectual community, has to, in a sense, purify themselves. They have to look at your concept of protecting ignorance. They have to understand properly 𝒂𝒏𝒂𝒍. They have to look at the question of institutional morality and so much more. And I think this is very correct, that before we can act in the world, we have to look within at our motives, at our understanding, and so on. And it's not for me to talk about the intellectual and academic community in India. You can do so yourself. But thank you very, very much indeed. Just one thing, I slightly disagree with you on one thing. You talked about the number of speakers and all over and so on. I personally think that's an aspect of the incredible vibrancy of the Ambedkarite movement. Of course, there may be other aspects to it, but I think the Ambedkarite movement, all the talks in the villages and the towns and the slums, I think it's a wonderful thing. And I think it exhibits an incredible creativity and vibrancy in the community.
That's why anyway, I said intellectual entertainment.
Yes, I know. But thank you very, very much indeed, Professor. And I look forward to seeing you in Delhi or Pune or Nagpur one day again.
Thank you very much.
So now we come to our second speaker, Professor Nitish Navasagare, and he's a leading light at the...
Lokamitra, he will join in a while. So can we take a next speaker?
Okay, we'll take Manjula Ben.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. So now we have, well, I know her as Manjula Ben, Manjula Pradeep. I've got to know her very well over the last few years because she's been closely associated with Manusky, a sister organization of Nagaloka. And she also formally became a Buddhist at Nagaloka 5 years ago in 2016. But she's one of the most appreciated women Dalit activists today in India, and well known abroad for her activism, her fearless activism, her incredibly active activism. And she spent 30 years in the field. She's represented issues of caste and gender-based violence and discrimination in the UN and the European Parliament. Recently, she's founded the WISE Active Youth Envisioning and Engagement, WAI Foundation, building leadership and especially among marginalized women and youth in India. There are many, many more things I could say about her. She's director of campaigns in Dalit Human Rights Defenders Network and so on. And she's now a trustee of Manusky, Nagaloka's sister organization. So I look forward very much to hearing what she has to say. Manjula Ben.
Thank you so much, Lokamitra ji. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya to all of you. It's a pleasure and it's an honor for me to speak at today's event, and I'm like feel blessed by the words of Lokamitra ji. It's always a unique experience when I speak at the events organized by Nagaloka. So thank you so much for inviting me. I think what we are going to talk today is about the crisis and how it impacted the lives of people in India, globally as well. I think when I think about the pandemic, COVID, it just come up with in the mind is how powerful the nature is and how small and weak we are as human beings, and the impact of this pandemic. It was a global issue. It became a national, and how it impacts the lives of people locally, how it impacts people who are affected by being part of a particular social identity where they are discriminated and their rights are violated every day, and whether pandemic really impacted them and how it impacted them. Being an activist, I would like to put my point of view and my own experience of last 2 years while dealing with the pandemic. I think the pandemic really brought into the limelight of what the social reality is. And so many times what happens is that we discuss a lot about the issues, whether it is caste itself and how the structural inequality related to caste manifests itself with the social reality. But when the pandemic happens, how does the social reality, or based on caste, how it impacts the lives of the Dalits, right? How it impacts them in their daily opportunities, where they are treated as discriminated individuals or social categories, or also treated as defiled, and how whether the pandemic really impacted them more or less with regard to the larger social arena. And I would say that the marginalized communities such as Dalits, Adivasis, and Muslims were the most affected communities in the context of India. And we are in millions in that context. And if you see that the millions' lives, whether it was captured by the media, by the civil society, or by the activist, I would say that no, it wasn't captured properly. It was brought into limelight through social media or through mainstream media, but we can just see just a small piece of the social reality, how the pandemic impacted the marginalized communities in India. Because we ourselves were struggling with our own minds, because as you see, the pandemic was so powerful that it impacted our bodies, but it impacted our soul and our mind. And I think there comes the role of Dr. Ambedkar's own ideology and Buddha's role in terms of how do we envision ourselves being a Buddhist, and whether we can treat the pandemic in a way that where we can take care of people who are affected by the pandemic more than us. And being an activist, I would say that it was difficult time for me as well. In 2020 was the most difficult time, where you could not move out of your house and you want to help people. And how could you help those people who are migrant workers and who are from the marginalized communities, who want to go back to their native place, but there was no way where they can go back with safe kind of travel. And as we saw on the media, so many of them, thousands of them, walking on the street, walking on the roads, and many of them being killed in the accidents, young Dalit women, the Adivasi women, Muslim women, pregnant women walking on the roads. You must have seen those pictures and how it moved all of us, where you see a dead body of a young Muslim woman at the Bihar Patna station, as she was traveling all alone with her children while coming back from the place where she had gone for her work, right? So it did move us, but the reality is that how did it impacted us in terms of building our own strategies of addressing this pandemic with and then seeing how we can help those people who are affected by the pandemic. First of all, I think we as activists had to take care of ourselves, which is important, because it really affected us in our mind, and because when you see so much happening around us, we sometimes forget that we ourselves are also impacted, because many times the people with whom we are connected, we are not able to get in touch with them. My work was a lot on helping those who are surviving atrocities or violence and who are alive or who may not be there. And as you know, that everything which surrounded us in 2020 was the Hathras case, and how the Dalit young woman was gang raped and murdered, and how it was during the pandemic. So did the pandemic stop violence? No, it didn't. So it didn't matter to the people who practice social inequality or who practice discrimination based on caste or gender or religion. It didn't matter to them. And the social reality was that on one side, the government declared social distancing, which is more as untouchability, like physical distancing. But the social distancing doesn't make those who are violating the rights of the marginalized communities in terms of attack on them, physical attack on them, verbal attack on them, practicing untouchability. How do we live with that fact that on one side there was this pandemic which was around us, and on the other side, the people who still believe that they are so-called powerful and they are dominant to others, and they just forget that the social reality has to match with the pandemic. You have to practice equality. You have to forget that your social identity of being from a particular caste or a religion is more important than the pandemic. But it didn't matter to many people. And that's the shocking reality of India. That is the shocking reality of a caste-based Indian society, the communal Indian society. It didn't matter when there were elections. The political parties, all of them moved without mask. Nobody questioned them. And when someone goes without mask, in a simple person, and that person is arrested or by the police, and then they charge a fine on that. Okay, but why don't you follow? That is what Buddha said. Follow your own path, be your own light. You don't want to see that what you are doing and what you want to make everybody follow the rules related to the pandemic. Is this viable? Is it authentic? Is it credible? How does it match with the pandemic situation? So I think these are the questions which I am raising, because if you see the hospitals, the health centers, how they were impacted. There were so many frontline workers from the Dalit communities. They were the sanitation workers, and there was no social security for them. They didn't even matter for anyone. So I think those issues, how do we deal with that? There was no kind of empathy for these people. What about those women who were helpers, who are also called as maids or house help? How did their life impacted? I did a study on which was titled as "No Space for Women's Work in Unorganized Sector," and we did it in Uttar Pradesh. And there were these women, 72 women who were interviewed, or the case studies were made. And these women who were vendors or who were working, who were selling vegetables or in the brick lanes or sanitation workers, and their lives totally changed. Nobody bothered about them. And the kind of domestic violence which happened on these women, apart from harassment which they go through at the places where they work, and it was like a standstill. Nobody was even like, how much of money went even for the people who were affected the most. The people who were affected the most were the most poor and the most marginalized people in this country, and they still are living a very difficult life. Nobody worried about them, what happens to their mental health. How do they deal with the reality of somebody passing away in front of their eyes, not because of pandemic, but because of poverty? And I think that is something which never was reported. How many single women with the children, how did they survive and are still surviving? It's not that the pandemic is over, the crisis is over. The crisis is brought into another reality of crisis, and that is the economic crisis, the social crisis. I think people start to learn that they have to change themselves, their attitude, their behavior. But how much it has changed, because the discourse which needs to happen, is not over on these issues, but the discourse happen on how much do I earn, how much do I take from others, then how much I give to others. I think that the payback to the society, did it really matter during pandemic? How many us really put out our own savings, our own investments into helping the mankind, the humankind? I think this is what I would like to put as an activist, that our soul have to be touched upon with this reality, which has impacted so many people. And I would like to just bring you into one fact, is how people were looking pandemic as a principle of convenience, how I can make my own living much more than what I was making before. So pandemic has also brought that reality, that there were people who have also taken advantage of this kind of situation. And we also know that how there were the medicines, where the vaccinations, everything was available, but it wasn't being distributed, or it wasn't properly used for the most marginalized communities. So there was everything. So India is not a poor country. Let me tell you very frankly, India is not a poor country. It's the problem of the attitude of the people. And it's also like how you take the wealth within your own hands and with your own power, because you are looking at wealth and power as your social status, and you forget that during the pandemic you have to give more. And because ultimately, if you are not there, your wealth is not going to matter. So there have been so many great people who also supported, but the kind of support which was needed in our country, especially during the lockdown in 2020, was not enough to help the impacted marginalized communities. We who are a little better than them, we all had safe surroundings, we had proper food to eat, we had nutrition, we had health facilities, benefit, everything, we had an insurance. But what about the millions of people who were just they didn't even have a roof over their head? They were just kept in a situation where they have to think about how I'm going to earn my livelihood the next day. I work very closely with the grassroots activists, and I also try to understand them, and specifically women, that how it impacted their lives, who are activists. And on one side, their livelihood was also lost. And because these women are from the marginalized community, they don't have those kind of access to that kind of technology, and hardly some of them have smartphones. How do they survive? Because they, on one side, they want to ensure that their own social stability with regard to the pandemic, but also to help their own communities. And I think organizations like us and activists, sensible people, we want sensible people during the pandemic. And the sensitivity can only lay around if you really practice the Buddha's philosophy. And I think where you have the metta bhavana, that is so important for all of us. You have the compassion for the community. You have to have the love for the community. You have to forget your boundaries of your own social identity, whether I come from Dalit, I come from Adivasi, or I am a Muslim. You have to forget those identities. You have to forget that you come from a particular caste within the social sphere. And you also have to realize that you are part of an organization or a movement. And when you are from a dominant caste, unfortunately, those people, they hardly see with the lens of caste, class, and religion. I think the intersectional framework matters a lot during the pandemic. And I think that's what we came out with, that Dalit lives matters, like Adivasi's lives matters, Muslim lives matters. And I think this year for me was interesting, because when I launched the National Council of Women Leaders, I want to come up with the new identity of us as women, as leaders, but not from a particular social identity, as women leaders, and bringing into the forefront that the leadership, which was the guiding light is for us, is Dr. Ambedkar, Savitribai Phule, Jyotiba Phule. How do we learn from their lives, their ideology, their principles, their values, and try to follow them, not be to become a humble human rights activist, because activism itself is sometimes has a negative connotation. So I think that is something which needs to be understood, that how do we subdue our own anger, our own frustration, and then to be more humble and to be more practical when we are trying to help people who are affected in the pandemic and during the crisis. And I must say that what the crisis has taught us, the pandemic has taught us, is being humble, being what we are. So what we are within, and we have to see, we have to be without. So our inner reality should be our external reality. Our inner identity, which is with us, should also be seen by the people. That's what Buddha said. And I think as my previous speaker was saying, Yashodharaji was speaking that about Buddhism. I think this is what is the beauty of this religion. Is like it's a religion, but you don't have to go to the Buddhist shrines, or you go to that place and you have to say those chantings and all that. For us, it is a way of life. So that is what is real Buddhism, that you practice what you preach. I think walk the talk, that's what we say. And that is the inner reality, is that is what is Baba Sahib's own vision of Prabuddha Bharat. And if we had practiced, if the country had followed the principles of Buddha and the light which was shown by Dr. Ambedkar of Prabuddha India, enlightened India, we would have been in a better situation during the lockdown and post-lockdown. And now we are, after the second wave, we are trying to normalize ourselves. We have started moving around. I travel a lot, and I've been to 3-4 states. And I would say that we believe that the pandemic situation is over, and we can live that kind of normal life. But there's a new normal, and I think people have to follow and keep that in mind, because who knows what the next reality will come up. Yeah, because people sometimes our memories are very short, and these memories which we have gained for last 2 years, and this pandemic situation was something which shattered our own understanding of the economy, of the social reality of our country and globally. I think this pandemic has also brought us together on the digital platforms, where we can connect to each other, those who have this possibility. And it has brought us together as a community, forgetting our own religious or our social identities or our economic backgrounds. I think that is the beauty of technology, and not of hate speech, which is coming out during the pandemic. The social media, how it is being used to create more hatred against a particular community. The kind of language which is used, the meme is what you call, have been used. It really impacts people's soul and mind. And I think it's the time that we have to understand that during the crisis, you have to understand what you speak and what you write and what you share. And I think that if we believe in those values and with those principles, we really would make it a better world. And because we don't want a situation where our lives are affected more than the post-pandemic, before the pandemic happened and now. So I think if untouchability, if we do a study and whether untouchability is being practiced, as the intensity has come down, then we'll say, yes, people have become more sensible. If we say that there's less violence on women, domestic violence, then we'll say, yes, people's mindset have changed towards women. The patriarchy is being questioned. But I think it will be a long way. Although India is seen as a powerful country in the South Asia, and when we are talking about knowledge and education, we are far off than other countries. But our minds, how much they have changed. And I think that is what the pandemic has also brought us to think about, that if we want to show our country as a better nation, then we need to also look into how did we survive during the pandemic? What kind of strategies did we frame? And are we a community, then a society? Like, we are divided into so many communities, but as a nation, are we together? Is it possible for us to dialogue within the process of equality, liberty, fraternity? And I think when you talk about social justice, are we going to see a better nation and if it's happening, then it's great. But then we need to have our own leadership, establish in those spaces where we have been marginalized as academicians, as activists, as scholars, as doctors, as practitioners. I think in all those spaces, the marginalized communities have to take those spaces. And the last thing I want to say is we have to bridge across our own social identities as individuals. So for us, when we say Buddhism, we don't have to forgo that when somebody who is not from our identity is impacted or affected, we have to help each and everybody. That's what Buddha did. And that's what I believe that it's a true Buddhist philosophy, where you help each one and you don't judge anyone because of their social identity based on religion, caste, or gender. So I would like to end my talk here. And thank you, Lokamitra ji, for giving me this opportunity to share some insights, which is coming in my mind for last so many years. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah. Namo Buddhaya. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Manjula Ben, for a very insightful and passionate presentation or talk. Obviously, again, I'm not going to attempt to sum up this special talk, but I'd just like to mention one or two points. She made the point that we probably no one has seen the full impact of COVID on the marginalized communities. We've only seen a small part of it, partly because we couldn't move out of our houses, but partly for other reasons too. And she made the point that the pandemic didn't stop violence; it possibly made it worse, like the Hathras case. And in many ways, equality went down. She talked of frontline workers, mainly from marginalized communities, suffering more than other government workers. She talked about women who had lost their husbands and having to look after children. Well, we know this, but we do not know the extent of it. And so I think she was, and it's incredibly difficult for our minds to encompass in a country as large as India with remember, just the scheduled caste population makes up 1/6 of the population of India. That's possibly 240 million people. Then you've got the tribal people. Then you've got people, Muslims and others from who are suffering. You've got an enormous number of people from disadvantaged communities. So thank you for bringing that point out, Manjula Ben, and this is what we really hope for you. But also she made the point that this is a time more than ever when really followers of Dr. Ambedkar have to pay back or need to pay back. Many are doing very well in life. I'm adding a little bit to her. It reminded me of what I read in Babasaheb's writing so many times. People mustn't rely on others. We have to rely on ourselves. Yeah. And, now that is possible. Now, the Dalit communities, those inspired by Dr. Ambedkar, have enough strength to rely on themselves. So thank you very much. And then she came on to Buddhism and the and the need for sensitivity, the need for a love, a compassionate, active love that transcends identity. She referred to this at the end, that goes beyond. So, I may be from a particular background or I may be Buddhist, but I can't neglect Muslims who are suffering. I can't neglect people from other backgrounds who are suffering. So there's much more value that she said, but this is recorded and I'm sure you can get a copy of that. But thank you very, very much indeed, Manjula Ben. Good. So now we come to, is Professor Nitish here?
Yes, yeah, good morning, good morning.
Good, Nitish. So Professor Nitish Navasagare, who I've known over the years because he's been closely associated with the Manusky Trust for a number of years, and he's a leading light at the ILS Law College in Pune. and people speak very, very highly of him there. My own nephew here is one of his students, so I get special news from that. His areas of interest are criminal law, constitutional law, and law and public policy. And he's far from being an academic. He's a highly respected and articulate activist, and I enjoy listening to him very much. There's much more I could say about him, but I'm going to hand over to Nitish.
Thank you so much, Lokamitra. Sorry for joining late. I had my teaching sessions, so you can see I'm still in the classroom, and I just switched from one meet to another. Let's come to the point, and I have 15 minutes to make my presentation because I missed the introductory note. Lokamitra, if I have 15 minutes to speak. Sorry.
You've got, I warn you after 15, you've got 20 minutes in all.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. So I'll keep myself with the time span. So we were talking about, we are talking about post-pandemic crisis, and being a teacher of law and a student of law, I'd start with how things actually we look at from a legal perspective and how the legal system has responded and what we need to do. And then we'll find for the solutions, and maybe we may not have solutions for all the questions or all the issues we have raised. On March 24th, the Prime Minister all of a sudden comes on the national television and declares that at 8 o'clock he comes and he says that from midnight everything will become to a standstill, and people, everything, schools, colleges, industries, factories, everything will come to a standstill. So that is what has been said without actually deciding that what will happen to people. And then from next day we saw that reverse migration started. People from the cities started moving to villages, but there were no modes of transportation. And because there were no modes of transportation, people started walking, and they walked thousands of miles, hundreds of miles to reach the destination. Who are these people who started walking from back to villages? Who are these people who were walking? They were the same people who, in the decades of 90s, when globalization started and cities were in need of casual workers, they migrated from villages to cities. Now, these workers who migrated there from villages to cities, they migrated for various reasons. One is for a better opportunity. Second one, which the community from which I come through and what we speak about, is that when we were tired about the caste violence in villages, we started migrating from villages to cities. So when we come in cities, we actually stay near railway lines. We come to cities, we stay in slums, which are the ghettos, and where we try to start looking for daily wages work. So these are the people who come from Dalit Adivasi communities, who have come to the city and who are daily wages workers, or who we say that have, if they can't earn for a day, they can't survive. Now, these are the people who can't survive, and when without any planning, a lockdown was announced, they have to move back to the villages. They have to fall back on the villages. They started walking. There was no preparation made by the state to what to do with them, how to deal with them. Rather, in few states, they were prohibited to enter. And you have seen the picture that when they entered Uttar Pradesh, they were actually been sanitized by putting a balance of water on them, a balance of water poured on them, which was with some chemicals. So when we speak about untouchability, when we speak about people who are not been touched, or pollution and purity, during COVID itself, we find that how the state senselessly been using this idea of pollution and purity with those people who have been migrating. Who are these people? These are the people from the lower caste who have moved to the cities in search of employment. These are the people in cities in search of some livelihood. And as the moment we say that we have nothing to offer to you from tomorrow, they started moving back. Now, what does it indicate? It indicates that 30 years of globalization, 30 years of uh, grooming up of the smart cities, they can't actually sustain these people for one single more day. So if they can't work, they can't survive. If they can't work, they can't survive. Now that's quite alarming. So for me, it was work from home, and initial first period was quite happy for me because I was at home, and whole of the year the government is paying me salaries for I'm working from home, or I have the privilege of being working from home. And that maybe many of us who are sitting here in this online meet, but this is not the case with many, that they can't. There's nothing that they can work from. They on the very second day they become unemployed. So these are the people who got become employed. Many of them have taken loans from the bank for because they are in the business of transport, or because they have some other business, small business too. Everything was closed down, and the bank will stop claiming money from them. So the bank loan that started increasing a lot, they had to just give up their assets so that they could sustain. What it brought into this brought a huge amount of unemployment. Now understand this, that we have a amount of employment in an unorganized sector. The maximum employment is an unorganized sector. And when it closed down, so when we talk about employment, the whole discussion was about that how many people are being removed from an organized sector. Okay, so this is what the statistics we speak about. So many schools and colleges have asked their peons and asked their employees that don't come from tomorrow, I will pay you half of the salary. This is everything is documented, recorded, which may come in the auditor statements. But what about those people who are surviving on the daily wages, who actually work with someone, they're casual workers, and they became unemployed and they have no source to look into, no one to fall upon. So whatever money they have, they started to the villages. And when they came to villages, you come to the second situation where Manjula Ben, so you're talking about caste atrocities, you spoke about many more incidences. But what happened in villages, if you see the NCRB report now, National Crime Record Bureau, the number of atrocity cases in this last year has increased by 9%. Okay, so Baba Sahib said that villages are den of ignorance, sinking localism. Now, you people come back and you come in the same trap. Okay, so what have we achieved in the last 40 years, or last 75 years of independence? So we have big cities, we have smart cities. We had at one point of time a GDP reaching to 7%, and then people say that where is caste? When COVID came, the Prime Minister and others said that this pandemic is an equalizer. No, it is not an equalizer. It is not equal to everyone. People who are privileged will not face the same problem compared to people who are underprivileged, who are not privileged. And if you come back on the same village economy, the agricultural economy, you have to be daily wages workers there. Now, what happens there? The government doesn't come up with Manrega work. Okay, Mahatma Gandhi rural development, that whole work is 100 days work is your right. The government never came up with the scheme. Even if they come up with a scheme, the employment was not given to the members of Dalit and Adivasi communities. So caste discrimination percolates down. So what did the government did? The government said that we will be distributing you free food, dry food through the rationing system, and then they come up with the part that anybody who has a ration card there, he will get it. Who doesn't have a ration card will not get it. So then we have to fight out that it's not possible. We have a ration card. If I'm in city, my ration card is at a village, so I should get. So anywhere you have an Aadhaar, you get it. The point is that government is basically looking the issue that we will give you some amount of food grains, some amount of pulses and stuff, so that you can sustain for some time. But there was no fallback program on the part of government that how employment could be generated in the pandemic period at this time when people are jobless. You know, when if you come to, have I been to the big cities like Charminar and Hyderabad, and was Charminar, and it was prepared by the early erstwhile prince there. And you just have a thought about why this was done, why this was prepared. Some stories go this way, that there was a drought, people have nothing to do, and the king has a lot of money. So he said, let's do one thing, let's prepare something so that you get some work and you survive. So it's a simple economics that you don't, people should start working. You say there's a COVID going on. can you actually guarantee some type of work, because people are working farms anyway? So can you take out some work there, and so that people survive? Nothing of this thing happened. The problem here is that we declared this pandemic under an act called as Disaster Management Act, and this Disaster Management Act is dealing with disaster like flood, cyclones, and earthquake. It has nothing to do with something called as pandemic, which has come up here. We had a century-old act called as Epidemic Act, and that also Epidemic Act is quite vague. So this Disaster Management Act gives enormous power to the executives to decide what is right and what is wrong. What happened with what happened with this pandemic? People say that there's a strict implementation flaw. And that's true, that if you find anybody on streets, he was been punished, he was been fined. People used to police used to use violence, physical violence against those people. Everything was closed down, people were fined, and then there's a strict implementation law. If you ask a lawyer, I would actually say that it was actually a lawlessness which was on the street. It was completely a lawlessness. What is lawlessness? We, under a law which was actually for a very different purpose, gave power to the central government and state government to use a law in the manner they wanted. And therefore, there was absolutely no guidelines how to go ahead with this. And in this period, the parliament session was not called. Parliament was not asked to come and sit and decide over this part. And we said that, okay, let us do something, that let the executives have the power. Till now, the executives have the power. Initially, the prime minister comes on the television screen and he declares that what is going to be allowed and what is not going to be allowed. Then thereafter, the chief minister comes and he declares what is going to be allowed and what is not going to be allowed. Fine, you want to show leadership. But then it says that it is the Home Secretary who comes with the notification, and the Home Secretary one fine morning says that we have given this power to the state government. The state government says we have given this power to the local bodies. The local bodies say that we have given this power to universities and colleges. And then we have to find out where actually the power lies. Who has the power to decide this part? So we try to find an order in this whole lawlessness. We try to find an order in this whole lawlessness. Now, how does the Supreme Court react? Initially, when lockdown was declared, and with the declaration of lockdown, people started moving and migration started. PILC filed in Supreme Court. The government gave a statement saying that there are no migrants on the streets. There are no migrants on the roads. And the judges of the Supreme Court accepted those facts. Now, you will say that televisions, news channels, social medias, everybody were reporting that people are moving out. Okay, but the government makes a statement. The government lawyer makes a statement that there were no person, no migrants on the road, and the Supreme Court actually accepted the statement, where the Supreme Court failed actually to deal with this part. So if I see how Supreme Court responded, I actually divide this into three parts. One is the first. One is the first part of lockdown. The first lockdown comes in, then the aftermath of the first lockdown, second lockdown, and the aftermath of the second lockdown. So if you see, divide this in three parts. In the first lockdown, Supreme Court actually said that there are no migrants on the streets, so that's fine. We can do nothing. Supreme Court says that it's a matter of policy. The Supreme Court judge in an interview said that money, media, and resources, money, materials, and resources, these are necessary. The Supreme Court cannot deal with this part. So that is how they showed the helplessness. It is only when it comes to medical emergencies they started dealing with that, okay, oxygen cylinders and how many oxygen cylinders to be given to whom. Then they started rationalizing the rates of medicines. Then they started rationalizing, they're speaking about how hospitals should deal with this part. So therein the Supreme Court comes into picture. And this all comes into picture only when people go to the court and they say that you have to get into, because life of people are at stake. When in Uttar Pradesh, people were charged with put criminal charges on the people on the ground that they put on the social media about the shortage of oxygen. At that time, Chandrachud has to come and say that people, when they alarm others, they cannot be charged with criminal charges. So this is how the state was dealing with. Therefore, I said there was completely lawlessness in the name of law. The state was behaving in such an arbitrary manner that they would say that even if you complain that there is no oxygen or there are people dying because of lack of oxygen, then we will charge you with a criminal charge. We'll fine you, we'll slap a criminal charge against you, we'll put you behind bar. Here in this case, the Supreme Court has to come in and they say that you can't do this. It is freedom of expression. Just so simple thing. You don't have to go to Supreme Court and you don't have to High Court to know this. The government is basically should be a responsible government, but we don't saw the responsibility of the government at any point of time. It was something that was unprecedented. We never thought that this thing would happen. But such type of such unprecedented incidents brings out the actual social reality, the undercurrents. What were the undercurrents? First thing, now let us go to that. It shows that how health sector in India is completely, the health sector what we have is absolutely unprepared to deal with any type of challenge. So, all those big hospitals, government hospitals, in Maharashtra itself, in various government hospitals, there was a fire which broke out. Now, why did fire broke out? For the reason that many more equipments or many more facilities were never been used for a long time, and then we start using it without testing it. The fire broke out. So people died not because of lack of oxygen. People died also because they died when the fire broke out there. Okay, so in many hospitals, fire broke out. For oxygen shortage were there, bed shortages were there, medicine shortages were there, and people have to survive with whatever has been thrown to them by the state. So, how ill prepared we are in the health sector. Health, one, is a primary necessity, a fundamental right of a healthy life is a fundamental right of every citizen that we were not able to provide. We always make pat our back on saying that we have jumbo COVID centers, others, but usually as a health sector, it was completely a failure all over India. And this shows that post-globalization, we have not invested much in the health sector. Second one is an education sector. That effect is again double. One is that schools, colleges started charging the same amount of fees from the students, which they used to charge before pandemic. So there's no there are no physical classrooms. Virtual classrooms are going on, but you start charging fees. Now, when the parents started complaining, court has to step in and say that only the services which you provide, for those services you can charge, not for everything. So why bus charges and others, and now for online part. But at the same point of time, we have experiences in Pune. I mean, I am in education sector. If I tell you that many non-granted colleges reduce the salary to half. So if, for example, pandemic was declared in the month of March, and you have taken fees from the student in June itself. So till next June, the fees has been taken, and for that you have employed some teachers there, but they reduce the salary to half. And many of them will ask not to come to schools and colleges. So half of the salary not to come from schools, colleges, rather you are saving a lot because students have paid and you're not using your resources. No irreversible was there. So you can find that people how misuse this pandemic. So one thing is about employment, how in organized sector comes in. The major thing came up with the digital divide. We said that, okay, let us have online lectures with Google Meet and Zoom and all those facilities. With this comes up that even in my house, I have two kids. One is in grade 7, another one is in junior KG. I have only one laptop, and we struggle with this part that who will have a laptop at home to look into. The other one goes with the mobile. Many of them who don't have a smartphone, then they face this problem. Internet bandwidth issues are there. And for 6 to 7 hours, just sitting before the screen and listening creates another health issue which has not been assisted now, which definitely will come up in the next time. But what happened to these kids if they have actually attended these lectures for 6 to 7 hours? And the new way of the new normals that you have to Google forms, fill up the forms and sending them this. This all created a major problem which we have not yet, which have not been assessing. But you're talking about those who are privileged. What about those who don't? I have students who have taken admission, and when I ask them why you're not coming for online lecture, they say I work in the field and therefore I cannot come. So person who works in the field cannot come because says that there's no means of livelihood. I have to work in the field, go in the field and work. Earlier, that was the case. I have to come to cities. And when I have to come to city, in 𝒬𝒔𝒃𝒂𝒃 hostel, they used to pay me for my studies. Now I don't get scholarship; they don't pay me, and therefore I go and work in the field. And if I work in the field, I can't attend your online classes. So understand what happened to Adivasi and Dalit students when they used to come to Pune, they used to take admission to one or other 𝒬𝒃𝒂𝒃 hostel. They used to get allowances for that. They used to get 2 times meal there, and they used to attend lecture. So the whole system have collapsed. So I'm getting a pleasure here that I'm teaching for whole of the semester, but are my students learning for all of the semester? The answer is no. And what will happen to this batch, though they have passed this year, another year? Maybe at some point they will be thrown out of the education system because of this part. And this happened because they are not privileged enough to be at home and study. So the whole matter boils down to the hierarchy of society, the privileges what we have, and therefore this divide gets in. And then last the point which I want to look into is this, that recently the global hunger index figures have come out, and India is ranked 101. It was 94 and now it is 101. 101 out of 116 countries. So Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh are ahead of us. Okay, so the superpower in India was said was dreamed to be a superpower in 2020, and you know what 2020 brought. GDP is going down, but the share market is booming up. There's something fundamental wrong with the economics. What's wrong? If GDP is going down, it's going in minus figures. How share market is booming up, right? And then we come to this part, the point we just started with. Migrants moved back. 10 crore jobs, people lost their jobs, so unemployment rate has going up. And then we have this figure coming up as the global hunger index says that India ranked 101 out of 116. That's not good. What is global hunger index? It says that what is the nutrition which a child from 0 to 5 gets. So if the child are malnourished, then they say it is one of the indicator. If they don't grow as per their weight and height, it is then we say that they don't get appropriate nutrition and therefore they cannot grow. It means that child mortality has increased. It means that we have kids who are malnourished, and ना खाऊंगा ना खाने दूंगा, तो खाने नहीं देना का मतलब ये नहीं होता है कि आप लोगों को खाना भी नहीं देंगे. So that is quite a problematic situation. So with migration, what happened with that irresponsible decision of declaring a lockdown at 8 o'clock in the evening. I don't know what is the fascination of coming on the screen at 8 o'clock and making such loud announcements without any planning. People losing their job, coming back to the villages, people losing the job, and that all affected on the. And then the government is not preparing any backup. It doesn't have any backup plan that these people who lost their job would have a decent means of livelihood. And this all has something to do with a structural problem. Why this could happen? Why something that Adani's fortune is increasing day by day in pandemic. Ambani's fortunes are increasing day by day pandemic. And we have people, India has also been ranked 101 into global hunger index. So why is this disparity that at one level during pandemic, few people have become millionaires, and few people have lost their livelihood and they even don't give nutritious food? Why this disparity comes in? That is structure. That is not only because of capitalism, that is also because of caste system. And therefore, come back to a basic question, what Baba Sahib has said, that wherever you go, you will come across caste. And when you say caste, it is an inborn system of hierarchy. And this hierarchy percolates everywhere. I was reading a post of Hiram Kulkarni, who's noticed social scientist, says that an Amazon delivery boy came to me and I asked him how much you get. He said, with every delivery, I get 14 rupees. And I'm very happy because during Dussehra, there are many more deliveries, but usually I don't get it. So he works from morning 9 o'clock till midnight 11 or 12, and he may earn 500 rupees or 700 rupees. But what if he doesn't get a work? He should starve. So what happens that the owner of Amazon will keep on increasing his fortune. He will be earning money, but the last person who's working for him will get only if he delivers something. So what happens that if capitalism says that money will percolate down, it doesn't percolate down. Okay, so the problem is structural. That also happens with pandemic. That also happens with caste system. So if discrimination is in the caste system, the discrimination will sustain. Will there. So even during pandemic, people said that in the quarantine homes will not take food prepared by Dalit women. Why? Because this is structural. We don't want Dalit women to prepare food for us. Now you are quarantined. You basically nobody should come and live with you. You are the person who have been infected with COVID, but you don't want to eat food which is prepared by Dalit women. That also happens with the midday meal system, that you don't want to eat food prepared by Dalit women. So what do we do with the caste system? Has caste system died? No, it comes out. So anywhere you go, the monster of caste will come out. Wherever you go, the monster, you have to tackle it. So unless you answer this question of caste, unless you kill the monster of caste, unless you have the program of annihilation of caste, speaking about illustrations how it has worked out will not work. And therefore I think the mission of Prabuddha Bharat, that a casteless society of Prabuddha Bharat, is something which is very fundamental. The work what we do on ground is very fundamental. It's not about fighting with caste violence. Is one of fighting with caste violence one of the aspects, but to create a casteless society, create a society which is egalitarian society, is what is more important. If we are not able to do that, say, so when we say where there is caste, when the GDP was 7%, people say where there's caste, there's no caste. I say now come back and see what happened to caste. Caste says decreases. So come to pandemic, you'll find caste in very, very colored manner. So I suppose that uh, the executives have used the power in many states into a very arbitrary manner during pandemic. The Supreme Court, to much extent, have failed us. They have not come up to our expectations. They only came up only when oxygens in big hospitals have gone down. So whenever it happens that the effect of pandemic was hitting the privileged class, the Supreme Court stepped in. It was not. It never stepped in when it was the migrants who were on the street. And we as a civil society have also failed to a larger extent, because caste system has been working. I think I should conclude here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very, yes. Thank you very, very much, Nitish ji. Very, very articulate presentation indeed, as was to be expected. Raising many, many crucial points about the starting with the unpreparedness of the government, the sudden announcement of the lockdown, and the whole question of migrant labourers, who they were, how they'd originally come from the villages and went back into a much stronger caste system or caste experience than they had experienced in the towns, probably. Referred to Dr. Ambedkar's view of the villages. I'm not going to do justice to your wonderful talk, Mrs. G, but and how basic, I think the number of atrocities you said went up by 9%. Yeah, and that's what we know about. And I've always been told that there's, what we know about is only a proportion of what we don't know about, because of the very nature of the problem. How basic human rights such as health and education were compromised. Basically, again, calling for looking at Dr. Ambedkar's point that wherever you go, there is caste, and that unless we are able to transcend caste through the vision of Prabuddha Bharat, which stands for a casteless society, unless we're able to tackle this, there will be no long-term solutions to any of the problems that the pandemic has highlighted. Nitish ji, I haven't done justice at all to what you said, but thank you once again for a very fascinating lecture. Yeah. By the way, there should be a little bit of time for questions at the end. I think 𝒦𝒊𝒏𝒂𝒍 will coordinate those questions. So if you have any, please note them down. We won't have a lot of time, but little time. So lastly, we come to Dr. Vikas Jambhulkar, who's a neighbor of ours in Nagaloka. He's the professor of political science at Nagpur University. Like other speakers, like other academics, the academic speakers, he's lectured widely. He has attended conferences in India and abroad, and he's an activist and a very determined activist. So he's not just an academic. In fact, that's the beauty of our conference today, that we've got people who are not just academics, but they are equally activists. So I'd like to welcome our last speaker this morning, Dr. Vikas Jambhulkar.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brahmachari Lokmitraji. On this occasion of 65th Dhamma Diksha Din, let me at the outset thank Nagaloka for giving me this opportunity to express my views over the topic that has been set. And the topic basically relates to the crisis. So I will be basically talking about the crisis rather than talking about the kind of achievements that the Ambedkarite movement has come into and has brought to us. But then talking about the crisis would also would also mean that we take a look back and then move ahead. Obviously, the pandemic is a benchmark time from where we are now trying to understand the present crisis that we have. But my proposition is that the post-pandemic situation or the pandemic situation is an exposition or is only an uncovering of a pre-pandemic situation. That means that the crisis was already there. The pandemic only brought it out. The crisis for the Dalits, for the scheduled caste tribes and most of the marginal sections of the society has already been there. And they had always been in a perpetual state of crisis. This perpetual state of crisis has only been exacerbated, has only been magnified, has only been brought to the surface during the period of pandemic. And as we have my colleague, my co-panelist, Dr. Nitish, just have elaborated in a very nice manner the way it has affected the people and how the state machinery has responded to it, right? So my proposition is that the Dalits have been, or the marginalized section in this country has always been in a perpetual state of crisis, right? And this perpetual state of crisis is precisely because of certain reasons, right? Whenever there are structural changes within the state, say for example, when the Indian state was born in 1950, right, getting independence in 1947, and when we entered into a constitutional government in 1950, we announced ourselves as a semi-socialist state. It was a structure that we built upon, right? A democratic semi-socialist state, right? Though we called ourselves as a socialist state, but we were not completely a socialist state. It was a semi-socialist kind of a structure that we built up, right? But then, by and large, predominated by and hegemonized by particularly the higher caste, right? And therefore, even the socialist state was a very distant call when it comes to attending the problems of the marginal sections and the Dalits and the women in this country, right? So post 1950s, there have been various periods, whether it is a period of war in 1962-65, whether it is a period of emergency, whether it is a period of liberalization, and whether it is a period of pandemic. There can be various stages. Even what you can say, the disintegration of the Soviet Union was one of those periods. The Indian state too is marked by these periods, and all these periods have brought in some kind of a structural change within the Indian society and within the Indian state structure, and all that has, in a way, exacerbated the crisis for those who are at the margins, who are at the bottom end of the society, at the receiving end of the society, because first, they did not create this situation, and therefore they were not the decision makers of this situation. Second, every time they had to respond to this situation and accordingly adjust to the situation, we actually had taken a lot of time in terms of adjustments to this situation. So every time it was a crisis for them, and therefore they had to overcome the crisis by trying to adjust to these situations, right? So the society had to come into terms with the kind of a situation, with the kind of the structural changes that the state is undergoing throughout the period, right? As had been in the introduction, Lokamitra ji has mentioned the mention of the war, the Second World War. Dr. Ambedkar had to do a lot of interventions when he was seeing where this whole momentum is going to take place. The war was against dictatorship, right? And he had to take that position. Look, India has to fight a war against dictatorship as well, right? And therefore, the establishment of a liberal regime was the effect of, or what was the fallout of the Second World War. That establishment of the global liberal regime actually facilitated the establishment of global liberal regimes even in India, right? And therefore, those normatives that were set down in the post-Second World War period were also became one of the most important normatives for human rights movements and other kind of stuff, right? Similarly, the 90s, particularly with the demise of the Soviet Union, the whole triumph of capitalist economy came into being. Socialism is all over, right? It's a deathbed of socialism, the triumph of a capitalist economy, and obviously the whole world will be now governed through the capitalist structure. So again, in the 90s, early 90s, till the 1995, we all adopted with consensus the whole liberalization process that we call globalization, liberalization, and privatization, right? And this was a big change because it was going to dismantle the socialist economy or whatever the semi-socialist economy that we had, and whatever kind of representation that we that the marginal section was trying to get into this into the state structure, the public structure was now going to be dismantled. And that is what we have seen, a slow but steady dismantling of all governmental structures, and along with it, all the opportunities that occurred from the state structure, right, through this public structure, right? So the opportunities are now getting dismantled, whether there are opportunities within the services, whether there are the opportunities in education, and so on and so forth, right? So this dismantling is continuous at the state level, right? And this has now entered into a situation of crisis, and that is what we have seen. Nitish has just mentioned us, that the very existence, the pandemic has told us that most of the people in India, those who are at the margins or at the poverty levels, poverty line levels, they hardly can sustain a day because they have to work every day to get their meals every day. That's the whole situation. And therefore, the state has not been able to create those ecosystems wherein they could build up those capacities which were required to sustain in such kind of a capitalist economies, right? On the contrary, what the state did during these 90s and the 2000s of early 2000 period was basically pushing certain programs which actually forced the marginal and the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribe communities to take up government establishments, to move towards government establishment by providing scholarships for competitive examinations and so on and so forth, right? Which on the one hand was getting dismantled, but on the other hand, they were pushing these sectors, putting these people and pushing them into the government sectors, making them more vulnerable, because they were most of the time they were spending a lot of energy, money, and everything for the preparation of getting into these state structures. So this was happening. Much of the funds to get into the government sector was employed when the government itself was getting dismantled, right? So that is a contradiction in terms, right? On the contrary, what could have been expected was that they should have created such an ecosystem whereby much of the planning and funds could have been diverted into such areas where they could have built up the capacities of these people, whereby they could have entered the market economy, or where they would have been able to cope up with the capitalist economy. So this is the greatest flaw that I see into the planning structure. But then nobody was basically looking into this. right? And still we are forced into like going into the government structures and so on and so forth. We see that it is not going to come back. We are not going to come back to a socialist state. We are going to be more. The whole idea of reform itself is a reform based upon private economy. And therefore, any kind of reform is not about socialism. Any kind of reform is all about capitalism and private economy. So how far are we going to cope up, and what kind of programs do we require in terms of addressing the concerns of these sections of people to make any sense into the market economy, right? So this is a structural problem at the state level, right? Apart from whatever the structural problem at the state level, we have other problems as well. There is a continuous dismantling of the affirmative action program that has been there, and we do not see any kind of affirmation in any other sector. So sometimes in between 1990 or 2006, there was this whole call for affirmative action in the private sector as well, but then that has not been taken care of, and we see that there is a slow and steady dismantling of this whole affirmative action program in this capitalist economic structure. Also, on the other hand, the whole developmental state itself is taking itself away from the welfarist measures. Means like it is not about welfare now. It is all about competition. It is all about it is all about like you have to survive, right? In an open market economy where there will be an open competition between private players, right? But then I don't see it is a fair practice that is already there. There are establishments which are settled and well entrenched in the economic system. So asking the marginalized sections to come and compete with all those who are already entrenched in this economic system is a big task, right? Which will be really difficult for them to come up with. Even if you have a structure of financial assistance to them, but then the establishment won't last for long, precisely because in such kind of competitions they hardly have the managerial know-how as well as other resources and networks whereby they could sustain it, right? So I guess we need a complete ecosystem that would sustain particularly the marginalized sections into this market economy. And it is here that the state policies needs to be diverted. But then apart from that, my argument is that there has been enough of state dependency in the community. And as Alone has said about protected ignorances and all, the state has a limited what I can say reach in terms of reaching out to the people. That is what we have seen for the last 70 years of independence, right? And yes, it has a reach, it has the largest reach, but again it is limited by its own reach, right? Given the kind of the political socio-political and economic structure that we have. And in a market economy, obviously, it has the most minimum reach of welfare, or even for that matter, or a welfarist attitudes toward this section of people, right? And therefore, at the society, here I want to argue that at the societal level, there needs to be a consistent endeavor in terms of organizing the people to take care of themselves in a way. So this self-help ideology, the self-help movement has to be a very important movement, and it has to be organized. So the crisis is both at the state level, wherein we do not have a proper wherein this whole structure of welfare and what you can say a proactive policy in favor of the Dalits and the marginalized are slowly getting dismantled. And on the social level, we have a crisis wherein we do not have an organized voice in terms of organizing ourselves socio-economically as well as politically, in terms of creating a pressure whereby getting those policies from the government. So there is a multifold crisis, right? Because why is this crisis? The crisis is precisely because the political agency through which the articulation of the problems of Dalits could have been readily articulated are getting dismantled again. So it got first dismantled in Maharashtra, and secondly now it is getting dismantled in the Uttar Pradesh, right? Secondly, and in most of the states, hardly there is a Dalit political presence, right? Leave about the southern states particularly. Secondly, the social movements which used to take place also are getting liquidated in a way. Now you hardly have leaders and you hardly have those organized social movements with a proper laid down agenda, which is creating demands upon the state, or which is articulating the demands of the people and making call against the state and making those demands fulfilled. So the demands themselves are the very agenda that the social movements or whatever movements that are appearing within the society itself are not taking into context the kind of the larger changes that are taking within the political economy, right? And therefore they appear to be more sporadic. They appear to be very temporal in terms, and they hardly have a sustained capacity to carry out a long pronged kind of a sustained demands against the state. So there is a lack and there is a crisis both at the state level to address the demands and to address the conditions of the Dalits within the Indian scenario, as well as at the societal, at the community level itself, to articulate those demands in a more organized manner. So this problem is a problem which is there, and therefore all those kinds of understanding means like, how do we understand the problem? How do we articulate those problems? How do we convert those problems into policy demands? And all this kind of stuff have to be done. But then it has to be done in a more organized manner, and that is precisely where I see there is a crisis right now within the society. Right, and I will now end my talk particularly. As we have seen that, on the contrary, what we see as responses is that there is we see the crisis. There is no social state, no reservation benefits, no welfare measures, no concrete capacity building ecosystems. These are some of those points of crisis that I have tried to lay before you. But on the contrary, what is the response both from the society as well as from the state, right? And when I'm talking about the society, I'm talking about the larger society, and not just about one or two scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, or some other. So, as we see, there is more violence and aggression which is experienced by these marginalized sections. So, over the period of time, violence has increased. And there is even for that matter, nowadays we see a lack of data also in terms of the recording of these violences, and we have to depend upon sketchy reportings from the newspapers and so on and so forth. So there is the government mechanisms is reporting less in terms of the kind of violence that are being committed upon them. Then there is a rising cases of societal violence. On the one hand, there is a violence through the establishment. On the other hand, there is also violence through the society, right? So the dominant caste societies have been in terms of a very aggressive mode in the last few years, and we see the kind of an ethnic majoritarianism that is taking place, and which is actually trying to dominate and trying to teach lessons actually on the basis of the caste divides that we already have, and there is this more discrimination that is taking place at all levels of governmental as well as societal level, as well as there is a constant feeling of vulnerability which is there among the Dalit societies as well as among the marginal sections. So these are the kinds of the things that is taking place. So So due to the lack of autonomous political agency, whatever you might say, or a lack of unified political agency, both at the national as well as the state level, we see this whole dismantling that is taking place, and therefore the articulations, as we could have seen, are not happening, and the kind of a background support or a kind of confidence that one has when one has a political party or one has a political backing behind them is a different one, right? So the vulnerability is more in these days. There is a liquidation of social movements, and there is a lack of socio-economic agenda and any efforts towards institutionalizing socio-economic agencies of community development and self-reliance. So I see that there is a lack of a concerted efforts towards building those community development projects, whether it is in the health sector, as has been pointed out by Nitish, that the health sector is absolutely gone down and it was completely collapsed during the pandemic. The education system too has collapsed, right? There is a generation now which is already behind, and don't talk about when they'll be at par with the rest of the guys. So they are already behind, and therefore the pandemic, what the pandemic has done is a brutal attack on the kind of the capacities that could have been developed in a school ecosystem, but then that itself was not available to them. Apart from that, the university ecosystems and so on and so forth. Yeah, so I guess I will end up here. I could see Lokamitra ji trying to point out, and this is where I see the crisis, and we need a concerted effort in terms of looking at the larger picture and trying to locate how it affects the micro at the micro level or at the community level. So that is where I need to end. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to actually express my views on this occasion. I hope Buddha will always be with me, and when I say Buddha will always be with us, is that we will always be with the thinking tradition, with the intellectual tradition, with the critical tradition, right? Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Vikas ji. Very, very, again, a very good contribution to our seminar today. Very good indeed. Again, I'm not going to attempt to sum up, but just one or two points that struck me. First of all, Vikas made the point that the pandemic has only brought out the crises that is already not only already there, but always there. He said that the marginalized societies are always in a state of crisis, but others only notice this at particular times like this. And he also made the very interesting point that all periods of difficulty, national, international, have brought out the plight of the marginalized, made them worse, and made them worse because the decision makers are not from the marginalized communities. They have no say whatsoever in that. He went on then to articulate a number of points, but I will just conclude by saying that he looked at the larger picture, the larger social structural, government, political, economic picture, and showed how that impacted on the micro level. He showed how the sort of more positive forces were being dismantled and liquidated, and the negative, to use that rather limited term, negative forces were growing and militating against the possibility of effectively addressing these problems. And he gave the example of the increase in violence, both in the individual and the societal level. So thank you very, very much, Vikas, indeed, for another very good presentation. And
thank you.
I'm always worried when I sum up something when I say something at the end of a talk that I don't undermine the speaker. So forgive me, all four of you, if I've done that. So just before I ask 𝗦𝗲𝒊𝒏𝒂𝒍 if there are any questions.
There are a couple of questions.
Yeah. Okay. So would you like to take those for me, and then I will conclude in the 5 minutes at the end.
Okay, I'll quickly take them, and both the questions are for Nitish. From Bharat Agrawal. Nitish is asking, I'm just reading the question. You have described this state of lawlessness very aptly that prevailed during the pandemic and the lockdown. Would you say that our state completely failed us, especially those sections of the society who are already weak and marginalized? Relief measures which should have been instituted promptly for the deprived were not even considered. That's what he's asking, Nitish. So would you like to respond to that?
Sure. I think Professor Vikas Jambhulkar has very aptly said that the crisis was always there. It only surfaced. Yeah. So I think that this phrase, I'll just write it down and keep it with me, that crisis was always there. Bharat Agrawal, when I spoke about lawlessness, I have two contexts. One is that you're dealing with a disaster management act to a pandemic, and you give elaborate power, extensive power to the executives to deal with it the way they want, and that is not what rule of law means. So that is how I was looking at it, lawlessness. The second part of your question is that whether the state has failed us. Yes, definitely. During pandemic, we realize it. We have realized it much, that yes, the state has failed us. State has not come up to our expectation, because in a welfare state we expect a lot from the state. State cannot be a parent patriot only when it comes to snatching a land from a person, saying that the land belongs to state, but it also has to see to it that it gives all the situation is much easier. See, if you have some people who have been stuck up in Taliban, you will send a proper team there, and you will airlift them and bring them to India. So this is what you could do when hundreds of people are stuck up in some foreign land, because you know that it is our responsibility. So didn't the state realize that it is responsible? Thousands of people are migrating from the cities to villages, and they have movements of communicate to commute. So you can just see this disparity. You can see how the state actually works. So I think Professor Jambhulkar has very actually stated the crisis was always there, and we should never forget that annihilation of caste is our program. We should not divert ourselves from that. I'll just take one question which I saw initially, which was I think I should answer this. That in CSDS workshop, and it came when I was after I completed my talk, I thought it's for me, that Dr. Ambedkar's conversion was strongly political. What is your opinion? So this is what a question is. I think this question comes from an understanding that there is a strict wall between the church and the state, and therefore it is something which is political, cannot be religious. But another counter question is that nothing is apolitical in life. So you can't do this with that Ambedkar's conversion is not political. But the answer is that Ambedkar's conversion is more a cultural aspect, because he was looking at Buddhism from countering Brahmanism in India. So it was more cultural. So if your culture is political, Ambedkar's conversion would also be political. So you can just divide it. So I was just thinking one point, that in 1935, when Ambedkar made an announcement that I'll not die as an Hindu, so though I'm born as an Hindu, what were the repercussions in society at that time? Was it only considered to be a political announcement, or how Ambedkar was received, and how the whole situation was received, or was Ambedkar looking at it only as a bargain strategy? In 1956, we realized it was never a bargain strategy. He was looking for a solution. So he says that mukti kon pathe, what path lies the solution, what path lies the salvation. So I think just locating itself to be a political aspect into party politics would be very a narrow way of looking at it. Yeah, I think that question was to me, and maybe Lokamitra will be an apt person to respond to it. Thank you so much.
No, I have nothing to add to you, Nitish. Entirely agree there. I mean, I think you have to take politics with a small p and politics with a big P, and politics with a big P includes all areas of life. It's the cultural, the social, the economic, everything. Thank you. 𝒦𝒊𝒂𝒏𝒅, any more questions? 𝒦𝒊𝒂𝒏𝒅. We've lost him, I think, have we?
Lokamitra ji, this is Manjula. I don't think there are any more questions I can see in the chat box. So
Okay. So then I will conclude for this morning's session.
Lokamitra,
Yes.
I'm sorry, my power has gone, so I have to switch on to the mobile, and I could not unmute myself. There is one more question, probably last question. This probably Miss Kitty has asked some question. If she can read herself, because I have nothing in my chat box now. If she can read herself to Dr. Nitish, would be better.
Okay, please.
Hello, am I audible?
yes.
So my question is to Mr. Nitish. You talked about the existing problems and loopholes that were highlighted during and after the pandemic. So would you like to provide us with solutions to bring our problems to the minimum? In a way, we close these existing loopholes.
Okay, I don't have a very ready-made solution. Maybe every problem will have its own solution to it. But policymakers should make policies and analyze policies, keeping in mind the last person in the society. I think there's an echo which is going. So even when we look into there's no human touch in any policy making. Okay, so it's more of statistics, and it's more of looking into it from the point of view that how many people got what resources and how many time, but there's no human touch into this, and actually are they being benefited, and we should convert it rather than the right-based approach that getting these benefits is the right of a citizen. This should be the approach we should create, rather than getting this benefit is on the mercy and the desire of the people in power. So this should be a policy change in looking at it. But immediate answers for every question would be completely different. Maybe for education we'll have some other answer, and maybe for the purpose of employment there could be some other answer.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Nitish. Any more questions?
There is somebody has raised hand. Pradyumna has raised hand.
Okay. Who was it who raised the hand? Can you say?
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, some part of presentation I missed, but still I wanted to ask a small question. Like the state different, not only kind of the way, restricted people's movement and occupation and all that, but also there is a differential treatment by the state. For example, in Odisha, the Odisha government gave 5,000 rupees to Puri temple priests. But I was doing a small study in my village, and the musician, the people who entirely depend on playing music in different occasions, that was the season they entirely went job loss, unwaged. So my question is, instead of, even if you look at the constitutional morality or any form of any universal value, instead of helping the most vulnerable group, the state was helping those people who already are rich and have better sources of, kind of income, because Puri temple is one of the richest temple in India. So I just kind of want a kind of Buddhist point of view that how do you look at this kind of, betting the strong kind of strategy by the state? Thank you.
in a sense, this brings out Nitish's point about the organized and the unorganized sector with all the attitudinal sort of undercurrents. Nitish, would you like to just respond to this? And then I think we'll conclude this morning's session.
Okay. Again, the problem is that state distributing money itself is problematic rather than you make them work and give them something. Or if you distribute it, in that case, what are the parameters? That's the second part which comes in. Now, whether a Hindu Brahmin priest in a temple, whether it is his profession or it is his religion. If it is his religion, then you are paying something for someone for what he follows his religion. So it is against the secular fabric of the nation, right? So a person who is a barber, he can't say it's his religion. He would always say that it is his profession. So because he don't have job, you're doing it. So but a priest in a temple is doing a religious work. That is what always claimed since last thousands of years. So in that case, what the state has done is that though they may be it's a vote bank politics, but what they've done is against the norms of the constitution. So you rightly said it is against constitutional morality, and it is again against the existing norms of the constitution. State cannot give the taxpayers money for the promotion of any religion, and if you give to a Brahmin priest, it is actually promotion of a religion.
Thank you very, very much, Nitish. So I'm going to draw everything to a conclusion for this morning. Once again, thank you to all the speakers, all for excellent presentations. And I have a request. We didn't say this before, but I would really like these talks to be part of our Nagaloka archives for the future reference of our students and also the general public. And I know you're all extremely busy people, but if you do have a chance, or when you do have a chance to write down your talks, I would very, very much appreciate it, and we can make them available like that. I won't promise to publish them in paper form, in hard copy form, because that's another job, but we can at least put them on our website. So that's my special request to you all. I like to, we talk of despair at the present situation, and I'm a sort of outsider, so but I'm sort of being married here and working here for so many years. I've also got an inside perspective, and I can fully understand people's despair at the undercurrents, the tendencies, the attitudes, the underlying situation, the way people think that society is going. But what I see along with that is the incredible strength of the community of those inspired by Dr. Ambedkar. I was thinking, 40 years ago, 43 years, 44 years ago, I came here. Until probably the mid-late 80s, early 90s, even later, you could never have got a collection of 4 people like we've had today, speaking in such an articulate, such a confident, and such a determined manner. And this is the incredible strength and development of the community. And you've got a sort of a curve which goes like this. It's going up at a very, very fast rate. So, and sometimes it's said that as things begin to change, if you like, as the light is shown on a situation, you see all the dirt. I don't want to deny anything that people have said about the way society is going or the way things are going, the terrible violence, and so on, and the compromise of basic human rights. But I believe that we're seeing that partly because of the strength of the community. And so I hope you won't mind my optimism about the situation. And if the community of those inspired by Dr. Ambedkar continues to grow at the rate it's growing, I believe in the end there will be a real effective tackling of these issues. How it will take place, I have no idea, but this is my own reading the situation. So thank you, all of you. Please write down what you've written, because they all are very, very valuable indeed. And a request to all the people who have been listening to join us at 2:15 when we're going to listen to 4 more very special people on, in a sense, the solution. And they're going to be chaired by, none less than Professor Thourat. So I think we've got a very fascinating and interesting afternoon ahead of us. So please join us at 2:15. Don't be late out of respect to our speakers and our chair. Yeah. So thank you, all of you. Namo Buddhaya Jai Bhim, and see you this afternoon.